Hello guys, I'll start from the beginning with English because we have a couple of people here that speaks only English or French or any other language than Romanian. Thank you for coming. Today we'll have a coffee talk about barista career and a journey to a world of coffee as a younger barista to a pro. And together with us is one interesting guy that we found in London a few weeks ago. We met him there and we said, okay, let's have a talk about how is the road from a barista junior to head of coffee for an important coffee brand like WatchHouse. So WatchHouse is one of the most emerging brands in UK right now, developing pretty fast, quick. They are growing a lot. They will open a store in New York very soon on 5th Avenue. And together with us is Ryan, so let's give him a round of applause.
Thanks, man. I have notes here.
So you need to know that I didn't prepare anything because I would like
have small preps.
Oh, awesome. I would have to have this conversation pretty open, and if anybody wants to ask questions, to keep it as casual as you can. But first of all, please tell us some things about you. Who is Ryan, and what is he doing in coffee?
Yeah, cool. So I passed away for now. Thanks. I've been in coffee for nearly a decade now. I started off in coffee. I actually, through my university career, which was in sport and totally separate, I worked in hospitality, but not really specifically coffee, but I worked in bars, restaurants, and I was always really interested in food and drink and cocktails and anything else. And to be honest, when I was in the bars, I actually more got hooked on a bit of latte art. I think it was back in the days when like latte art was kind of kicking on Instagram, and I was like, So I was having fun, but I was working with really terrible coffee because it was more like focused on food, and I think 10 years ago, even good restaurants didn't have good coffee. We used like generic coffee brands, Le Cafe or anything like this. But my friend basically sent me a message and said, there's this really cool coffee bar and they serve you like a card with your filter coffee, and at that time that was like huge news in Scotland, right? So, and probably huge news 10 years ago in general. So I sent some pictures of my latte art to them and said, hey, I'd love to join, and they gave me a job, and I wasn't allowed to touch the machine, I wasn't allowed to go near anything, and I knew nothing about coffee. And I was still studying at the time, but really what happened from there is they had a small roastery, and I started attending the cuppings every morning. So before my shift, I would get up and go and just ask if I could join and quietly like cup behind the roasting team and learn a lot more. And I think from there, like I got hooked on the idea of coffee from I love tasting things, and I love that idea, and then I love the idea of origin and where they come from, and playing games around like where do I think the coffee came from, and I slowly just moved away from any career in sport. My goal was to maybe become a sports therapist or something like that. And what I exchanged at the start of my coffee career was knowledge around the training and building training and how to train individuals and how to train people of different backgrounds, of different skill levels. So I offered that to the kind of coffee didn't, I think, and maybe still like doesn't really have that very well executed. It's still very kind of one size fits all type thing. So I tried to build like bespoke trainings, and in exchange I learned about roasting and about sensory, and I moved to London just over 5 years ago. And I've been with WatchHouse almost all of that, so four and a half years. And in that time with WatchHouse, I've I've judged the barista and brewing championships, for a few years. I've went and got my Q grading license. I've went on Q processing and really tried to focus on getting involved in green coffee and in sensory. But I've also spent a number of years in London and in our bars. My title's always been head of coffee, but when you have two shops, you are a barista really, maybe in charge of quality. So I've spent my time working in very busy coffee shops as a barista, but now most of my time is taken up with buying, with sourcing coffee and trying to work on doing something interesting with sourcing. So our goal in the next year is to try and source, 52 coffees for our ranges. So having new coffee every week as a target to be exciting. So that's taking up a lot of time, but I'm still quite involved with our barista teams and meet them monthly and try a lot of coffee and always still geeking out about working behind bars and flowing.
Did you knew at the beginning that are you gonna do for long run, or it was a process getting in love with the product, with the industry?
Yeah, I think I had two passions running alongside each other. I think the key factor in wanting to be a sports therapist and coffee was I really liked the idea of positive impact on people, and I think that they're very different people, right? Some people, if you're a sports therapist coming in, everyone's got a sore back or sore shoulder, and they have the money to spend on a sports therapist, which is not generally cheap. But then in coffee, it was more this idea of the kind of social aspect going back to like origin, and the idea that this industry wanted to do something special and do something great and add value to a chain that was is a commodity in the grand scheme of things, and I thought that's really exciting. And then slowly I think that twinned with a passion for, I guess it was gastronomy, in the time, thinking that I could combine that became more exciting to me. So quite quickly I would say it became the full-time passion. After only half a year or so in the company I worked in Glasgow, I kind of finished off the sports remedial therapy stuff, and then just focused on coffee.
How do you think the opportunities for a barista change through time since the beginning of 2010, for example, to now?
Well, I think the biggest challenge still is coffee's definitely growing in UK, so there's a lot more, I would say, respect for the craft and skill of coffee and of baristas. So I think the opportunity to develop is there, in the sense of now we see a lot more around are you a trainee barista, a junior, a senior barista, and going through these levels is something that we do, and something I think now that more companies are doing. So there's a little bit more defined pathway. I think the challenge still in coffee, from my perspective, is the cap on the price of coffee, and therefore the cap on what a barista career can earn in a very traditional sense. So I usually try and compare it to cocktail bars, where the best cocktail bars in the world, right? They can have very I think highly paid bartenders because they sell £20 cocktails. So I think the limit that we have is how can we as an industry get to that, where then you can have these highly experienced baristas being paid at a high level because they serve coffees at a high price, which is something that we're trying to do. So I think that didn't exist 10 years ago, the idea of more expensive coffees, and therefore a high-skilled barista being able to have a higher value in a very real sense, in a very measurable sense. But I think it's growing, but there's still a limit that we need to push.
We were talking earlier about 10 years ago, a barista career was more like a stepping stone to a different industry. You were thinking, okay, I'm a student, I'm gonna do being a bartender or barista for a couple of years, and then I will switch to architecture or some therapist or something. But I think right now there are brands that are emerging and growing, and they offer possibilities of a different range of positions or careers. Now you can be a sourcer if you want, you can be a roaster, you can be a trainer, you can be a trader sometimes. So there are many opportunities that maybe 10 years ago they were very limited to big companies. Right now more and more companies are growing and offering this kind of opportunities. At least here in Romania, little by little they are growing.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point that basically as a barista career, like you say, that the opportunities tend to move into other skills. So as a barista you have to be developing other skills, whether you have goals of becoming a roaster or a sourcer or a trainer, or they each also then have quite different skill sets. Particularly something like roasting can be very separate to barista in a way. So the sensory skill you pick up as a barista can be really useful, but you then move from maybe you're someone who enjoys the the social engagement and you're really good at that service element, and that's not really anything to do with roasting. It can maybe be more monotonous in a sense, like it's very, you know, repetitive in another way. So I think that is a challenge as a barista career, that it will move at some point, like when you hit the barista ceiling, if you like you move into something else. But let's say, like for us, like new roles that emerge are things like area coffee trainers, which probably in the restaurant industry it's quite normal to have an operations manager, right? So someone who has 5 restaurants in their remit, and we start to build that into the coffee side. So we have that on the non-coffee side of the business. So we have someone who looks after a number of shops, and we now have that in the coffee side of the business. So someone who's been a head barista, who's ran a shop, coffee, and now they look after 5. So they start to become an area, and that expands, and again opens up the pay ceiling, and also like expands their skill set as they now try to manage 5 teams and identify opportunities, and those are things that I guess wouldn't have existed in a specialty space some years ago.
WatchHouse is a brand with 10 shops now?
10.
Okay. How can you relate with such numerous baristas, number of baristas? You work with different characters, different types of personalities. How do you manage to understand with each one, and how can you give them your philosophy of sourcing coffee, making coffee, because I guess everyone has to relate to one philosophy that brand has.
Yeah, London is exceptionally tricky because we have so many cultures. So like, you know, I heard a thing about like there's like 360 languages spoken in London and all these kind of like things. So like communication and being able to relate to such a diverse team is probably one of our biggest challenges.
Here we have Lee, and that's all.
So yeah, what we try to do is our program makes sure that before people enter a shop, they have 1 week in what we say is induction. So they learn they get an insight into our ethos, and we try and capture that in like in a more simple way that they can relate to the customer. So we perhaps don't go so deep into the detail, but we try and give kind of more like top level ideas around. With our sourcing, we look to buy coffees that are exclusive to us, and that's a value to your customer, because no matter where else they go, they won't have the same coffee, because we're always buying the entire lot, or we are actually going and asking for a lot to be made for us, and that's something you can sell to people. That's like an ethos around it. So we try and stick to very simple things, and then we maybe build on that as they go through. They learn more about. They do learn in their initial weeks enough about processing and things, but we try to keep it quite things that they can relate quickly to customers that aren't very complicated. But and also it's the important part of, and what we also do is, it's not myself that runs an entire induction. What we also try and do is take a number of our head baristas or people who all have different backgrounds. So you might spend an hour with me, you might spend an hour with our Irish female head barista from one of our shops, and then you might go and then spend it with our Greek head barista from another. So you listen to a lot of voices, and I think that's very important. So it's not just coming from one place. You're hearing what maybe a number of our team members who have a number of different experiences have had, and I think that helps.
So in each team you have a head barista?
Yeah, so our shop ecology is in a smaller shop. So if we have an espresso bar shops, and we have brunch shops. So brunch sites maybe have, let's say, 60 seats inside, and they offer food, and they're more complicated, and they have bigger teams. In these shops, we will tend to have a head barista and a lead barista. So think of traditionally manager-assistant manager relationship.
What's the difference between a lead barista and
It's kind of like manager-assistant manager. So like a manager is the overall, like they are in charge, and the assistant manager, they kind of cover their days they're not here, and they have a bit of an overlap. So we want to secure that in 7 days we have the person who is responsible. So I always used to notice that maybe like in shops you would have a head barista, and then when they were off, there wasn't a clear person who's leading the coffee side. So we always have someone covering their days off who has a title of lead barista. and they're essentially the shift leader, if you like, on the coffee machine those 2 days, and then they work in tandem. And then alongside that, we split people into senior, junior, and trainee as our 3 levels, and we manage where and what shop they might be in. So if we classify a trainee as someone who's able to do certain tasks, whether it's they can do shots or not milk, whether they can brew coffee or not brew coffee, and we make sure that we have the right people in the right shops and right positions. So
some roles are if somebody's not prepared to do filter coffees, you avoid putting them
a certain shop or a certain position, or they have to be on shift with certain people. So we have like to be a senior, you say you've got 20 things that you have to have ticked off. So as a trainee, you maybe have 5 and then 10. So we know where and how to place you. And it changes in any given moment because, of course, one shop at one moment might have many seniors because they're progressing, and one might have many trainees. So we are usually moving people quite a lot to try and make sure every shop's covered.
Aren't people reluctant to switch to the shops?
Yeah, this is a big challenge, and I think
it's the same here.
Yeah, it's a big culture question. So that's why we're also trying to bring in a little bit of what we're going to call clusters. So we have shops that you might have 4 shops quite close, and we now start to group them. So they actually have a monthly meeting as a seniors. So the manager and head barista of those 4 shops, they actually meet monthly, and that builds a bit of community around those 4, so that at least they're a bit more like, if that shop needs someone to cover them or something, they feel a bit more likely, they feel a bit more easy about doing that. So we're trying to build little cultures within each shops, because like you say, when we didn't have that and everyone doesn't feel, you might not feel connected to the Meron on the other side of the city, you'd feel a bit more reluctant to go there because you don't know anybody, and so we're trying to get past that by building more culture through smaller team meetings or.
In Romania, switching from a small shop with a big shop, for example, sometimes a barista is more reluctant because the rush hours, and they're trying to avoid rush hours. And there are people who like rush hours and they don't want to work in a small shop where they make 50 coffees per day. Yeah. I think it's depending on your personality and how are you built as a person. If you like talking to people in rush times, probably you'll more be willing to go in a busy shop. But also here in Cluj, for example, baristas are more willing to work closely to home, so they can walk or make short trip time to the coffee shop. I don't know if it's happened to London, but it probably is the same.
Yeah, commute, like getting to work plays a big role in where people would like to work. What we try and do when we bring people in is not define what their shop will be. So we like to try and at least they will have a trial with us, but at least like to have a bit more time before we designate them a home shop so we can find them the right place. But we usually, once someone's settled, they don't want to move because of commute times or the shop being, our shops offer very different challenges. So maybe the range from the quietest to busiest can be 400 cups a day up to 1100 cups a day in the busiest shop, and we're open for like 9-10 hours. Okay, so that's like probably like at 1100 with a machine that's kind of getting towards the cap. So there is a question of, they don't want to move there. We actually have the opposite thing where people like the very busy shops because we also run a trunk system. So a system of, when you pay service, you get the money is managed by like third party and things like that. So when you work, there's a like incentive to work in the busiest. So people don't want to move to the quieter shop because they get less of this. So there's a lot of like reasons people don't want to move around. But again, I think it just comes back to if we build a strong culture and friendship between all the teams, then everyone wants to help each other out, and that's helping to make people move around and flex. And then also we try to sell it more as like a way to progress. So like a lot of reluctance, it's like we try and like move people in a way that's going to help them. Like, so, say that
progress.
You've been here for a year and I know you love your shop and do this, but I think like you know, with the skills that you have, and like, you know, maybe going to here offers you a new challenge. It's busier, or it's a bigger team, or, you know, and something to maybe, you know, we think that you work in a very small team where it's yourself and another barista, and that's nice, but maybe if to work on your team skills and your communication and these skills, like if we move you to a team that has 7 or 8 baristas, this could really help develop you in that sense.
Let's say you have identified a talented barista in one of your shops, and you said that you see in him that has a lot of potential to grow. I want to ask you, from the barista perspective and from the coffee shop perspective, what do you think the barista should do if he knows he's talented and he can grow a lot and he want to do a career in coffee, specialty coffee? And what a coffee shop should do when sees a talented young people that wants to learn a lot about specialty coffee?
I think our job is to make sure we have the systems in place to first identify that talent and then to nurture that talent. So we need to make sure that we're actually able to meet. If someone's got talent, we need to have the thing in place so that we're actually able to train them and offer them, you know, progression. From the individual side, I think it is identifying clearly what progression you want. I think one of the big struggles can be that you have someone who you feel is really talented, but for them to try, and of course you can help, for them to try and define what do they want to achieve, because they may already be a head barista, they may already, and you say like, so do you think you want to move to a bigger shop and manage a bigger team, or is your goal to have your own coffee shop in the future? So, you know, does that drive what you might want to do, or is it roasting you've thought about? And we had a lot of people who are really, you know, really passionate, talented, really invested, but when you ask what they want, that's something that they struggle to answer, and I think that's something that really has to come from the individual, because yes, you can offer like, well, would you like to buy coffee? Would you like to roast coffee? Would you like to be a manager? Or, you know, but it's very difficult. I think that's something for the barista to make sure they're thinking about, like, what is it? Is it training that you love to do? Is it, you really try and pinpoint, like, one, what you're good at, and two, what you really see yourself doing, so that you can, when the time comes, you can say that to the person. Whether that's a system of, we have kind of professional development plans, so you likely, if you're a barista, you'll meet your head barista after a 6-month period, and so being ready to answer what you want really helps. If we know that this person wants this, it helps when that time comes to say, yes, I know that they really wanted to be a trainer, so let's make sure if we're going to now employ someone to do training that we mention that to them. This helps.
Cool. Do you have, guys, any questions so far? We found the talent, and we know what to do with him. What do you think a coffee shop should accept trainings and offering possibilities? Do you offer to your guys some career plan, some opportunities that they might achieve if they continue the progress in their field?
Yeah, so we kind of assess like what opportunities we have. So as a company that's opening a lot of coffee shops, the first initial thing is like, do you want the challenge? Things that we offer people who are at that level of needing a new challenge is, do you want to be involved in the process of that next shop? Like, do you want to take ownership of that shop, and therefore we can involve you even before it's open in that process? Like, that's an opportunity. So a lot of people want to do that would like to go back home in some years and open their own coffee shop. So that's one option that we offer. So every month we're probably opening a shop. So we're always hunting or like sending out the advert internally for that talent maybe 3, 4, 5 months before the shop. So they have an opportunity to come on board early and start spending maybe a day, or at least be involved in some of the meetings to see what it takes to open a shop. We mark people for, opportunities in the roastery. If someone's looking to be a guest, what we try and put in place is, what's difficult is like, when will a role come up is what's never known. And like, you know, let's say you have 200 staff, and like, you know, there's going to be a job in the roastery next year. So it's like, it's very competitive if you even have 20 people. interested. So what we do try and offer is potential to not have a full role, but if we know that you're very passionate and involved and you've hit like the training ceiling, can we offer a day a week when we are in the lab and you can maybe start to roast the samples, or so offer like these opportunities to develop in a training way, but in a way that you actually start to do a day in that sense. Or if you're really invested in training people, but we don't have a trainer role, but we'll make sure then that we're giving you some of the time slots to train one of the modules. Like you can train latte art. So trying to give a bit of your work week to something that you feel is progressive until a full role comes, because they are very limited, I think, in the coffee, like how often the roles come up and how fast how fast people want to progress. That's what I find quite challenging people are. So yeah, we offer, like, we try and work together on reasonable opportunities that are sustainable for the company and offer the person what they may want.
Cool. What does it mean to be head of coffee in WatchHouse?
I think the head of coffee is there as, they are the guide on what do we want our coffee profile to be, because in the end that's something I think subjective enough, in that your roast style and what you want to deliver and what message do you ultimately want to deliver to customers. So the role is to try and keep that message strong within the senior team and guide that coffee team and keep them on that path and stay true to that. So if my goal is to, as I mentioned, like add value to the market by always bringing coffees and names that have never been seen, and to make sure that that is exposed to the customer and that every coffee we serve has that story and highlights that. Like I need to make sure that I am delivering that story in everything that I do, whether it's the communication to the customer, whether it's a meeting and having the right amount of contact with head baristas and people. So like I think the job is to keep that mission and with everybody through being a part of a monthly meeting. The head baristas always have a monthly meeting. I don't run that meeting, but I come and take part and have like some time to say something. The job is to get around the shops and maintain the culture and passion around coffee. Of course, like if you're interested from a more like very like, what are the hard things that a head of coffee is doing is making a sustainable buying plan, not just from buying the right volume, but at the right prices, and making that commercially viable, and studying a lot of these things. So a lot of relationships. So I think a head of coffee will spend a lot of time on external relationships, importers, exporters, producers, your machine all your equipment partners. So building those relationships and making sure that all of that is sustainable and in check. This is a big part of the role. As coffee is generally, we're planning 6 to 12 months in advance, all of our contracts and what we're looking to buy, and lining all of that up, and keeping it all together. Because if you ever want to become the head of coffee in a coffee business, you'll end up working probably with a marketing team and others, and you're really the person that's able to keep them on the right track, make sure they're communicating the message, making sure you deliver them the information, making sure your production team have everything they need to get the coffee that you bought. So you're a real, I think, this kind of thread, this kind of person holding, getting everyone the right information at the right moment. Because without that, that's what connects it. Like if you don't, and marketing are talking about something else and you're wanting something else said, and production aren't really sure about coffees and what you want on, then things get lost. So
you need a little more of emotional intelligence to deal with.
Yeah, and you need to be I think a head of coffee needs to be very, very logical, and you need to I think planning and logistics. Like you need to be really, really on it with planning and making sure it's done, because in a barista job, it's very it's very immediate, right? Like you make coffees and it happens. But with a buying job, you're more looking at, you're trying to plan for 6 months ahead, and your success, I think, will be how much you can plan ahead, because that will allow everybody to, by getting the coffees in front of baristas a month before they launch, and having baristas have some exposure, having the whole team have exposure, having all that information to your team ahead, means when that coffee comes to your guests, everyone is very prepared, and everyone, you tell a better story, and you make a better coffee, and that all comes from how early have you organized it as a head of
8 months
coffee.
ago.
Yeah, so you have to do that, especially if you want to successfully. Coffee, I definitely find, and maybe this is certainly what all the baristas tell me, like what they find exciting is new coffees. Like when a new coffee comes, like that's what's exciting. They want that. So to deliver a lot of new coffees, you need to be well planned and prepared, because if you start, it can get very messy, because keeping quality great across a lot of shops when you're launching a coffee every week and keeping that organized, I think is a big logistical planning challenge. This is skill of head of coffee.
Did it happen to you? Barista tells you that he doesn't like the coffee that you.
Yeah. We ask this about every coffee, and I think that's the interesting thing about coffee is historically it's very like, I think back in the day, like years ago, it was very, if you don't get it type thing, like with a customer, like a specialty coffee, and if you don't, but I think it's important to you always get feedback on, and it can be funny things. So we have actually, the teams send a weekly report on their entire shop, and one of them is coffee feedback, and it's actually very useful because you just see things like customers love that we love the natural Ethiopian, and it's actually really important from a commercial perspective. Like, write that down. Don't, that is actually important information. And I think maybe before you just whatever, I know what's good, but actually seeing that natural Ethiopian goes really well. So I need to make sure and focus on doing that. It can't just be they don't like this funky coffee, but I know it's good coffee. If that's what people are saying, it is important to take that on board, think about it, and maybe move maybe don't buy that coffee next year.
It's the same here. If you have an Ethiopian coffee on your shelves,
Ethiopian
everybody's happy.
But the curious things like we cupped this morning, this Costa Rican, very very funky, and coffees like this have got great feedback from customers, right? And that's an important thing to note and say, okay, make sure when planning next year that you get those coffees in, because they're successful. They motivate the team, and the customers enjoy them. I'm
curious about the approach of a barista or a shop about your coffees. For example, if you give them coffee to work with, and they need to find a receipt every day to brew that coffee, let's say for an espresso. It happens sometimes to have different approaches, because each one of us are different, and there is one barista that likes to work, with pre-infusion, the other was better with temperature or with dose or everything else that it's there in a recipe. And do you have a strict approach that you are forcing a shop to work with that approach, or you give them a freedom to each barista to try their approach, and if the result is good, you accept the result of the cup of coffee?
We control some variables, so we make some higher level decisions on, we don't think pre-infusion on La Marzocco's is good. So we turn that off, and we just kind of set that as it's not to be used. But we still allow a lot of freedom in terms of dose, yield, extraction time, and these kind of things. We more control any big things that we think is not functioning well on a machine, or on average causes a problem, or from a roast level, we control more rest times of coffee, but we do listen to feedback, because some coffees are different. So sometimes a shop might say, we actually want to rest this coffee longer, and we will monitor that and say, yes, we agree. But we try and make sure some of those things are consistent and controlled. But things like If you believe you need to dose 18 grams, 19 grams for your shop, if you believe you need longer yield, we are quite okay with that. But what we have with someone coming around checking and trying to spend a lot of time just going to shops and trying coffees is if it feels something is greatly wrong with the coffee. Like if it feels very different than what we want. So if I believe that an espresso should be something that is very, it should have character, but it should be something that's very balanced. Like it should feel balanced. It should be a balanced espresso. It should have sweetness. It should have acidity. It should have some bitterness. It should feel like this. If I go and it feels just very like towards very acidic, then that's something we'll highlight. I think how we monitor that is through the monthly meeting with head baristas. A part of that is always a tasting. It is always like making some coffees, and then it's on them to get that to their team. So more if we didn't have the right coffee in a shop, we wouldn't. Okay, if something was really bad, I would go there to the bar, like just to talk to the barista. But otherwise, if it was like, I'm not quite sure about that, it'd be more like talk to the head barista and make sure they talk to whoever maybe was dialing in and see like what they think and check that we are understanding and on the same page. But generally, I think tasting together does that. So we're not super strict. We are quite maybe a bit strict, to be fair. I talk about espresso because in London, espresso is a big part of the culture. We have some controls on pour-over recipes, but that's more to do with in very busy shops, we have to deliver a lot of pour-overs. So we make sure that our recipe, we control a bit that the recipe must be 5 pours of 50 grams with a 30-second gap. The reason for that being is that we know then if you get an order of 3 pour-overs, we know that then if you stagger that, then you can deliver 3 pour-overs, and this is commercially very important to ensure a table and to ensure people can get their pour-overs in a good amount of time. Yes, we advise them that it's going to be slower, but we're not then waiting 15, 20 minutes. We're still getting our pour-overs before our food, which we think is important. So what they can more work with on pour-overs is grinding size, is water temperature. They can change the dose a little bit if they feel like just a bit more dough, a little bit more strength in this coffee will help, or a bit less. But the pouring technique is controlled for that reason, and that's been a balance between like we've used that technique when we went to do World Brewers Cup, and like we know that it produces good coffee. So, but it's important from a workflow perspective.
All right. Do you encourage teams to calibrate together themselves so as a team? Like, I don't know, if you have a shop where there are 6 baristas, do you have some meetings to calibrate them together, or how does it work?
Yeah, our shops have, again, something that we would then audit the manager on to make sure it's happening. They have a monthly meeting on a shop level. And as a part of that meeting, they should have a cupping or tasting of the coffees. So that is for both baristas and front of house. So we did something recently where we swapped to having this. We have a menu that gets sent out. We change the menu every month. So we do a month menu. So we moved a lot of, as we grew, what we realized is that we need to time things in a very specific way for quality. So in the last week of the month, all of the team meetings happen. I make sure they have the coffees for the upcoming month so they can taste them with the team. And every team member from the front of house to the barista has tasted and talked about those coffees. Because again, I think that comes back to that organization element of getting that done assures a success. So yeah, they should have a monthly meeting. Some head baristas, especially in bigger shops, do organize further meetings with their barista team. This will be more in line with the role I talked about, where someone looks after an area. If they identify something in particular, like they're regularly not happy with the dial-in, or regularly they notice something, they might ask the head barista to call a barista meeting and target a certain thing. That could be filter brewing, it could be batch brewing, it could be espresso, it could be workflow. If they feel like, the service time in the shop is not what it could be, they might say, let's have a barista meeting and target this thing. But those would be more on a reaction basis. But monthly, we have a very consistent
Cool.
shop meeting.
Questions? I said that would be an open talk, but nobody wants to.
I have a question.
Yeah.
You said that your role as head of coffee is to make sure that your vision on quality of the coffee, on the origins, and everything that WatchHouse stands for, you need to make sure that that is going to the marketing, to your baristas, and so on. But at some point you said that you do kind of survey with the customers, and if a customer, I'm not sure if I understand correctly, but if a customer doesn't like one sort of origin, and you as a head of barista, a head of coffee, and maybe with the production team, you think that it's a very good origin and it should be there. Do you think you should always be aware and align your coffees with the customers, or you should be the one that?
Yeah, so I think it's like not as black and white as, okay, let's not get it, but think about, okay, let's figure out why. Is it because we haven't maybe trained our baristas on properly how to work with such a coffee? Maybe it was a very unique coffee and we didn't actually execute it well. It's more about being sensitive to why people might think that, and not then say, okay, let's not get that coffee again, but maybe more, okay, like what do we think we can find something a bit, should we find something a bit different that still matches our ethos on how we've sourced it, but maybe just watch the profile. Maybe it's not quite the right profile for the market here. They're not so keen on that. Yeah, I think it's more about molding and listening and thinking about, oh, okay, maybe, you know, maybe not yet, maybe not for here, maybe it wasn't for espresso, maybe it was for filter, or so I think still like.
Follow-up question on
yeah.
this. Did you study the New York market? Because you said that you're gonna open a shop there. Did you study the consumers market back in New York?
Yeah, the plan is to go there for a period of time to look at what, if we go to the 10 coffee shops, like what is on offer, what is the roast profile, like what are people drinking, and then how can we apply how we want to source coffee to that, and how should we, because like for me there's hundreds of great coffees out there, so, and if I'm going to pick 50 of them, I don't mind if I'm like, okay, maybe for New York, like I don't see much of this coffee, so we could try it, but maybe we should see what the reaction is, and we can go for one of the other great coffees that we like that is that kind of profile that they seem to also love. So I think it's like a meeting. So we will go and study what people serve, and not just from a coffee perspective, but from like other drinks and tea and everything, and you know, mold a little bit to that, and our recipes. So cold drinks are huge there, so we have to think about that.
Just to add a small detail to the earlier question, I think it's very important the percentage of the people who complain about a specific origin, because if you have a particular case that might be a solo example, that doesn't mean the coffee is not okay. But if you have several customers that keep telling you that the coffee is not okay, that might be something in process of preparing or brewing the coffee, or maybe it's something with roasting, or maybe it's something with green coffee. But it depends probably on how many people are telling you the coffee is not good.
It's maybe not like if someone says something. We had someone recently who bought probably their first natural Ethiopian and said this coffee is rancid, which is a very strong word. Oh, well, so we talk to them and say maybe it's like this, and then they say, oh yeah, maybe you're right, maybe it's just the profile. So it's not like, oh, it's not by natural Ethiopia, but it would be more like a longer term, like just gathering. You know, if we serve in our shops, let's say 8,000 coffees a day. So if across a month, I ask the baristas, okay, tell me about the 5 coffees that we had, and like what was successful, what do you think wasn't successful, why? And take that information and then use that to inform the next year's decisions, as they might tell me like, this coffee was like for us the best, like we love this coffee, customers love this coffee, and so, well, great, like we'll think about that. Or like, this one was very hard to sell, we found that people after a week, like, you know, they weren't really like engaging with it, and say, okay, like that's important notes to think about. And I might not then change it. I might say, okay, but you know, it's important to buy this. Or I might say, okay, maybe we change.
Did you say 8,000 coffees per day?
Yeah, probably around there.
For 10 shops, that means 800 cups per day?
Yeah, something around
That's
there.
a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, for...
So you get a lot of information over a month. You're seeing a lot of like...
How can you keep the consistency of those 100 cups?
I think it's really hard. Like, I think that what is the goal of consistency is quite tough. We want people, you should expect, like again, my calibration is like, if I go and have the same coffee in the 10 shops, I should be able to identify the coffee. Like, it might not be the exact same because we have different machines in different shops, we have different water bases in different shops. So there are reasons why it may be a bit different, but it should be identifiable as like the natural Ethiopian or the washed Mexican, or you know, like, it should be quite easy to get to that coffee, and should have the thing that we thought. In terms of monitoring it or maintaining it, again, that comes back to the regular meetings and having someone visiting the shops like often and checking the consistency. I think training and calibration is the key. I think it's really easy to underestimate how often you have to get your wider teams together. That's been our biggest challenge, like how quickly you can grow apart a bit.
Well, I noticed in London that there is this way of doing things because coffee shops are having a lot of customers during the day. I was talking with a guy from Roslyn, I forgot his name now, and he said that he's serving 25 kilos per day of coffee, which is huge amount of coffees for 3 stores or how many he has. So coffee shops in London try to have milk beverage. That means that you have a specific blend or espresso roast for that milk beverage. Then is this origin for espresso, and you have filter coffee. For me, for example, the problem is the difference between the milk beverage and espresso origin. In some coffee shops, the difference is so big. So I have something very, very common coffee, roasted a little bit more intense, or maybe it's an 82, 83 points coffee for milk beverage, and for espresso, maybe have an 87, 88 points coffee or more complex origin. Do you relate with this philosophy, or do you think a coffee shop should offer the same kind of coffees for both milk beverage and espresso?
Yeah, I think it's a good point, because it's funny, because it's actually one of the first things. So we used to have a roasting partner, and then we started roasting in 2020. And the first thing I said, then that's the common way that it's done is like, okay, milk, espresso, whatever, and then okay, then we have good coffee. And the first thing I said is like, I don't want to do that. I want to find coffees that I think are going to be great flat whites, and sometimes the milk espresso can be higher scoring than the regular, because why not? Because actually, from my perspective, to make a great flat white is you need something actually more fruity or with more character to come through the milk. So normally, actually, I end up kind of maybe buying something that has a bit more body sweetness in straight espresso, because actually, like, it's quite easy to get, and find that I need to buy. I don't want to say buy better coffee, but I'm always just thinking of like best milk espresso, and because I also think from a culture perspective, what I always found in coffee shops was like that work with such a way, right? They go like the blend for milk, whatever, like it's ready, and then they focus on espresso. So by not doing that, people are very focused on, okay, the milk espresso, and then you see if you go to see the baristas dialing in, they're like making some flat whites, trying them, talking about them. There's actually a coffee there to make work, and I think it's really important. And I think to what you say, it's important that London being busy is like, to me, like an easy excuse, but what we should be looking to do is find solutions to offer great coffee, like at volume, right? So that comes back to that pour over technique, right? Like, how can you not, it's too busy for pour over, so we'll buy a machine. It's, well, how can you make 3 pour overs?
We
like
were talking about that.
Our skill should be to, But if we are like talking about barista skill, and barista, like our skill is to find ways to do that, to deliver that, and you can do it. Like you can absolutely do it. Like yes, you have to invest in it and you have to train it, and it's not like is making 3 pour-overs like efficiently and to a high standard easy. Absolutely not. But I think that's why you have to pay well for those baristas and have them there. Like that's the key. Like absolutely you can get away with. I think in London you can get away with like just making a pretty good, like if the milk's good, like and it's not too roasty, then you're a pretty good place. And if you get people out the door in 3 minutes, then they're quite happy. But I'm not sure if for me like that was never the plan or ethos. Like the plan is to deliver great drink experiences.
In big cities there is this this challenge of people who want quick, fast service. Sometimes in Cluj as well. There are people are coming to the store where we've been this morning, and they just want quick coffee. In London was the same. We've been to European Coffee Symposium where we met, and we've been to a couple of shops, and they didn't want to do V60 because they didn't have enough time to do it, so they choose to do batch brew. So between a V60 to a batch brew for a coffee geek or a coffee professional, usually there is an important difference in terms of complexity, flavors. Sometimes coffee shops are using for batch brew maybe not such a good quality of coffee, but if they have to do a V60, they would choose the best coffee they have and the lightest roasted there. I'm curious about your, because I drink a beautiful El Diviso coffee, and I told you at the conference, the shop in Hanover offers V60 and some interesting origins like rarities on the counter. How the people, are they willing to wait for a better coffee, for some rarity lots? How it's happening in London?
Yeah, it's been very successful. So basically we launched a menu, we built in a freezer to the bar, and we launched a menu of 6 of the best coffees in the world, so coffees that have been in world competitions. We offer 3 espresso versions and 3 filters at any given time, and we change them. And it's been very successful. We sell in this shop more rare coffees than batch brew. Which is for me was a real, when the head barista sent me the numbers, I was really like, for me personally, I was like quite shocked. And they tell me that they have regulars who they just buy this coffee like once per day. And like, I think that we can, as an industry, maybe have fooled ourselves, and baristas, I think, and as a barista myself in the time, like can be guilty of this, thinking that the customers don't know, the customers don't have much knowledge. And I actually think that they know more than we think, and they're more willing than we think to be exposed to these experiences. And of course, I speak from London, but like London, yes, has a lot of coffee shops, but the culture around like really amazing coffee, I would say, is not high in consumers. But they're still like people that come to your coffee shops are obviously people that must like nice things, right? Because the space looks better. So they must be somewhat interested. So. I think that it's been really successful, and I think that people have become really fascinated by it. And customers, you would never, it's not just coffee geeks turning up, it's people from the offices turning up and coming and saying, yeah, I want to have El Diviso. Like even people come and saying, like, can I get El Diviso as a flat white or something, right? Like, and you're like, well, no, but I don't know, maybe. But so I've been really, I think it shows that. And that's why we did it as a test, and we will start to roll it into more and start to put it back into others and figure out how to do that, because we see that maybe we've convinced ourselves too much that we already know better than the consumer, and we know we need to be careful not to do too much, when actually I think it might not be true. Like, do you have to offer solutions for people who want to come in and have a like a quick coffee experience? Like, yes, I think it's good because it's good to engage anyone who wants to have coffee, but what's important is you don't start to, get rid of the whole purpose of this thing, to share great coffees, right? So it's like, where do you draw the line on like specialty is very interesting because when do you become like specialty or not? Is it just buying green coffee of 80 points, or is it more than that? Which is a really interesting question, you know. And I think you see some people start to go towards, to me, like maybe they buy some good coffee, but I'm not sure. Is it specialty experiences or is it, yeah.
I have 3 more questions, but before that, maybe some other ones. What do you think is will be the, well, in London is already something that is big. I'm talking here about alternative milk. We were talking about flat whites. Oatly is the king in London. All over the places you can see this. In Romania it's starting to grow and it's more and more used by customers. How do you pick your coffees according to the milk?
Yeah, we pick our coffee according to regular milk though. So our milk espresso we still pick according to regular milk. It's still, in terms of tasting the coffee's character, like milk still beats Oatly quite easily in my opinion. Oatly milk will be quite oaty, so I definitely find in a sample of 10 coffees with Oatly, they are much harder to discern and they've definitely lost some of the inherent character. Like I don't think it matches milk. I think that there's now so alternative is huge in London, so we have some stores that can be close to 50-50 dairy.
Really?
Alternative, yeah. But 60-40 maybe still towards dairy is the normal split.
I think it's here is 80-20.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah. I can see it, and I think even in Asia it's probably less. Like we never see, like we see a lot of Asian customers come. It's always dairy. It seems that alternative is not a thing for them. But what's interesting is it's definitely not. It's not even really like a dietary requirement thing. It's just that people have got used to take oat milk instead of dairy. I think that Oatly were like kind of the first ones there that really came. But I think that there are now better from an oat milk perspective. There are some better products in my opinion that can give more of a coffee experience. But in the industry in London, there's a big fear to swap from Oatly. It's very safe. It's like seen as a very safe oat milk. So moving towards some of the other brands, I guess, that are big are minor figures, and they now have their organic option, which I think has helped a lot because it definitely, to me, I had it with, I think, a washed Ethiopian, and it was much easier for me to say, is washed Ethiopian coffee. I have the profile I would like. And another brand that we're starting to see, they are big elsewhere, is Califia, the Australian brand. They're used by all the kind of main people in Australia. They're a bit bigger in America, and now they come to UK, and they are probably, for me, on a taste level, like maybe probably the best. They definitely make very balanced flat whites that have a lot of the character of the coffee. But yeah, we're in a tricky situation with coffee, right? Because dialing in right is easy for espresso and is easy for filter because you have like a beverage. It's very hard with milk espresso because you have to make a choice. Like, do you want to dial in for dairy, or latte, flat white? Like, you basically have to, in my opinion, like focus on the main drink experience. Like, okay, we want the flat white to be the one, and everything else just kind of has to fall into place. So yeah, the hard thing is that with the good oat milks, even it's about is the same dial in, like good as an oat flat white and a flat white. So with Califia, it's like pretty close. It's probably still verges a bit towards maybe a little bit too acid, like can be a little bit sour, and I think this is the biggest challenge and why there's a fear to move from Oatly. I think everyone wants to move from Oatly because, well, probably like there's a lot of things around the sustainability elements and who's invested in them now. So people from a alignment with specialty coffee like want to move away from Oatly, but they're just a bit scared to
Difficult.
do so. Yeah, but I think actually, funny enough, Alpro's oat barista product is really good as well. But there's definitely better oat milks. It's just people actually come in London and ask for Oatly. They don't ask for an oat flat white, they ask for an Oatly flat white.
How do you deal with decaf coffee?
We have a really good decaf. We tend to have in most of our sites a Mythos grinder for that, alongside the same grinder as others. We don't do our own decaf at the moment. We still source, well, we roast our own decaf, but we still source decaffeinated coffee. We don't decaf ourselves in a plant, but that might change. Again, the mission was the same, like trying to find a decaf that is, still has an identifiable character. And it's tricky because the decaf process is very intense, and you definitely lose. In my opinion, with decaf, you basically lose a little bit of intensity and flavor because they take things come out, so it's not just extracting caffeine, right? So you basically lose. Depends on the process they use, but especially if you're asking them to do something like a Swiss water process, they don't actually like these processes because they take out quite a bit more than it's not as effective as like ethanol and things to just remove pure caffeine. So what you end up with is you remove a bit more, and then after they have to basically rehydrate, right? So decaf just definitely has less concentration of the compounds that are going to create the flavors. So they're always just a bit flatter. Like there's just always something missing, right? There just is. Like caffeine is actually just part of what just finishes the coffee. But our goal is still to, we have a coffee right now, Wash Colombia, that's still got some good citrus, and when you make it as a flat white or an espresso, it does have good character, and it's not so like pushed like decaf, but it is still decaf, and we still hunt. I'm interested in like low calf stuff. I think some people have done that. I think it's really cool. I know the Barn basically offer Lorena as a decaf option, and I think that's a really cool way to do it, and I would be interested in doing that. Like I think something like this is nicer because after going and seeing the decaf process, you feel a bit less keen on it. I went to Bremen in Germany where they have the decaf plant, and you see like how it works and the reality, and you think, not sure this is great, because I think they were telling me basically that the kind of whole story about sugarcane process and stuff is, at the end of the day, they make the alcohol for it. If you wanted to extract caffeine with sugarcane, you would need to, farms of sugarcane somewhere and it wouldn't be efficient anyway at all. So they probably wouldn't want to do it because decaf business is basically about selling caffeine. That's how they work. You go there, and then there's this big room of white powder that they sell to pharmaceutical, to cosmetic industry, and to Coca-Cola and energy drink industry. So that's the business model, and So.
All right.
But yeah, we still do it. I think you don't have to, but yeah, I think offering a decaf. How do you do it?
Us?
Yeah, you don't.
Right now we have a decaf for sugarcane process. Yeah, from Colombia. So far, I think is in terms of flavors is one of the best we have in Meron. But of course, at the beginning, we didn't thought that will be such a big request of decaf, but right now it's growing. I think decaf coffee and oat milk beverages are growing on the same rate here in Romania. Maybe because people are developing a lot of allergies, a lot of things that they feel they cannot drink caffeine or regular milk. So these two things are growing pretty fast. Most of the coffee shops are offering decaf, maybe except some small ones, but usually in Romania you have to have decaf to offer. One question again. How do you see the competitions, the coffee competitions in the life of a barista? And do you think these competitions are some sort of accelerator in their career?
Yeah, so I think that coffee is very, I would call it a bit fast and loose. So I think that in coffee, people can go 0 to hero very quickly, and so the competitions can suddenly, yes, I think they can definitely like springboard you, like because it suddenly can put your name very high. But what I've found, and I think they offer. I think they offer great, if you do them in the right way, if you decide I'm going to do a competition and you go through the process of learning and becoming better at brewing, becoming better at espresso, learning the hospitality side as you have to have great eye contact and all these things, like it's a process that can help you as a barista. I would be wary that I don't think it doesn't necessarily, I've met many people who have done well in competitions, but like, it doesn't replace the experience on the bar, in my opinion. Like it is a way to maybe make a bit of a coffee celeb name, and it is a way that if you use it correctly, you can definitely progress as a barista. But I think that there are things that it doesn't teach, and the only risk is sometimes we've certainly had people come who have had a good result somewhere, but they don't have the experience, and they still are really going to struggle a lot on the bar. But I think they're very positive. I think that just be prepared that I think to get a lot from it means putting in a lot of work. I think you can also do them and get absolutely nothing from them. If you and having judged for a few years, you see people who have clearly got so much from the process, who have said they've been working for a couple of years, but have really like sat and really read the competition and really worked on everything and come and delivered a great presentation, and that's moved them forward. And then people who have signed up and not done much and turned up and really don't get much. So I think
it depends on each individual.
Yeah, you have to work on and actually get involved in the process. You can apply as passively or as actively as you want, but certainly there are some great. I think they do teach a great lesson in just how far you can take your sensory and technical skills of making a coffee, and how far you can take your customer service skills of because something that I think is very important is how well can you share a story and share a message to people and offer a great experience, because I think that is the other side of being a barista. I think how well do you offer an experience to guests and guests of varying experiences, from never having specialty before to a lot. And I think you can really learn that you can learn some of that through the competition. It will definitely train you to look up and look at people, which is something that's something that we actually work on a lot, because it's a big challenge to get people into this habit. Because I think that even for me, I think coffee barista can definitely attract, if you like, can be somewhat introverted and like to be behind the machine, and the machine's a nice blog, but there's a big part of what I think makes a very successful barista that is that experience and warmth that they offer is a huge part of it, and the competitions exposes you to that. I think if you do like a barista championship, you'll feel absolutely fine behind the bar. And I've seen baristas in our team who, like, when they're doing a competition, they just become maybe almost annoying on the bar, but they try and like talk to every customer and like try and really like work on this communication, and it's really amazing to see. But yeah, I think they're good.
And the last question of the day, what would you tell to the younger Ryan to do different in these 10 years in his career? Because I guess you had some steps in your career, and you saw, now you can see those steps through these 10 years of specialty coffee. What would you tell to yourself if you've been again 10 years ago?
I think I would tell myself to I've been lucky to meet now a lot of amazing baristas who have now taught me a lot, even though I was a head of coffee, that I've learned so much about, and I would have told myself to kind of slow down a bit, appreciate a bit more, and really continue to delve more into, like, espresso and making, and like, really like don't overlook like parts of the process. I think I was very quickly rushing to I'm going to get to a roastery and do head of coffee, and I missed so much of what was also important, like learning more, like learning earlier. I could have been, as I said, I've spent quite a lot of time on a bar and on maybe a quieter bar, and I could have been learning so much more about how coffee machines work and how the water filtration works, and I could have really developed my knowledge a lot better on the bar, and I probably ignored that to an extent, and then I've been very lucky to meet baristas who are so passionate about these things and have taught me so much about, like different ways to distribute and what they affect and how to there's just so much to be learned on the bar, and I'll tell myself not to waste my time on the bar just waiting for the next order and actually learning.
Well, valuable information today. Thank you a lot for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Last opportunity to ask questions. If not, Ryan will be here today, tomorrow. Tomorrow you will judge 11 people competing. I hope you'll have good coffees. We have only dark roast and canefora. And I hope you'll have a good time. Thank you again. Please give him a round of applause for answering honestly. Mulțumesc mult că ați venit. Sper că ați primit niște informații interesante și că acest coffee talk a fost util pentru voi. Mersi mult!